Hello and welcome to episode 31 of Webflail, the podcast dedicated to uncovering the greatest failures behind the greatest Webflows, because success often comes after learning from many failures. I'm your host, Jack, a failure connoisseur, and today my guest is Casey Katalbas. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have to try that again. Wait,
Katalbas.
Katalbas. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I just want
You
to know
got
what
it.
it is. Sorry.
You got it. No,
Um,
way better than most people say it.
Okay. Oh God, what a great start to the episode. I first came across Casey because she made a YouTube video titled "I Made Tinder, but Just for Fish in Webflow." After watching this video, Casey's highly functional, ruthlessly efficient tech bro vibe made me want to watch more videos, like turning a scroll bar into a baguette, because why not? But jokes aside, Casey has got loads of interesting content on her channel, so if you haven't already, go and check that out. But after 3 years of freelancing, Casey had her best year yet in 2022. Her business, Artsci Studio, had 22 projects, and Casey got to the semi-finals of the Speed Build Challenge. Casey, welcome to the Webflow podcast.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me, Jack.
It is an honor to have you here. Now, you're the first Webflower that I've interviewed who had a previous career as a planetarium educator.
Yeah.
Tell us the story.
Yeah. I guess not a lot of other people come from that career path. Yeah. So I have always been a huge astronomy fan, hobbyist, was really into it in high school. When I moved to Nashville, which is where I am now, I got involved with the local astronomy community and found some really cool mentors there since I was still at college. And one of them had just left her job as a planetarium educator. And she was like, I think you'd be really good for this. And I was, I was like 20 at the time. I'm like, what? But yeah, ended up getting the job. It was such a good fit. It was right at the time there was a huge solar eclipse here in the US. So got to deal with a ton of people, a ton of experience just educating and developing programming. It's also sort of where I learned JavaScript because there was a lot of that needed to run the programs. So yeah, it was really just the coolest job ever, and I got to talk to people every day about how beautiful and wonderful outer space is. So yeah, I really cherish that time.
It's such an interesting kind of start to working life, though. I can't imagine there's that many people who have that kind of a start where they're basically kind of guiding the public through a very difficult topic to explain. And I imagine maybe that helped you with Webflow as well. And we talked just before recording about the importance of having soft skills as a Webflower to guide your client through a process. I mean, do you think that job actually really helped you when it came to Webflowers?
Yeah, I think, the primary function of that job was educator. And something I find a lot in working with clients is that your job is first to make and design a website, but a lot of your job is also to figure out their story and understand another person, and also, to figure out how do I help this person understand more about my perspective and how I'm approaching this situation. So in a lot of ways, it's also an education role, but sort of in a different context.
Yeah, I think it's a very undervalued skill set or at least it's not talked about enough, I think, in the Webflow space about how soft skills are really important. So I can imagine that was really, really helpful. And then I went way back in time to your YouTube music career. And I'm just going to read you some titles. We've got Getting Out, I'm Scared of Everything, I Don't Like You, So I Wrote You a Song, and Space Rangers. Tell us a little bit
Oh
about
my
your
gosh.
relationship with music.
You're really dug deep there,
I
Josh.
really, I went
That's
down.
circa what, 2015?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. So before web development or web design or even planetarium stuff, I've always been a songwriter, which was something I started when I was very, very young. When I was quite young, I didn't have a ton of friends, but YouTube was becoming a thing. And I was in the position where I had a video camera, and a lot of people I liked on the internet wrote songs and posted them on the internet. Um, so I started doing that too and made a lot of friends, and also just really fell in love with songwriting and fell in love with, like, taking my silly little experiences as a 16-year-old girl and trying to, like, make sense of them in the world. But found a lot of, like, really beautiful connections online and, um, really found the importance of online community and, like, the internet is occasionally, most of the time, a dumpster fire, but it really helped me understand that, like, oh, there are really some good parts of being here and making connections online. So that was really valuable and also just kind of birthed my love of music and songwriting and just writing for others.
Yeah. And I think the Webflow community is a lot like maybe the early YouTube community,
Yeah, I
where
was talking about that with somebody recently. It does feel very, like, organically human excitement on the internet about something very new, and that feels very, like, early YouTube to me too.
yeah, and I think the way that you can message people on Twitter, say in the Webflow community, and just say, "Hey, can I have a call with you? Like, could I have a coffee with you just to pick your brains about how you've got to where you are?" Is the type of thing that I'd imagine in the very early YouTube days. There's not necessarily that many people commenting on your videos, and you might see the same name pop up, and then you might message them and say, "Hey, thanks for watching my videos." And I can imagine that type of thing maybe kind of prepped your way into the Webflow world quite well.
Yeah, yeah, it was something that I was very excited about when I first entered this community. A lot of people have said this about Webflow, but, like, the Webflow community feels very different than, like, any other, like, community built around a software. Like, it's very encouraging and very, like, active and, like, the connections there are very just, like, organic and true and helpful, which is just very rare, I think, online these days, especially professionally, um, to see
Yeah,
that.
I guess it's kind of like I think Mason Poe talked about this in the episode that I did with him, but a rising tide lifts all the boats. So
Yeah.
imagining that the more Webflowers introduce Webflow to other clients, the more generally people will be looking for Webflow developers, and it kind of helps everyone. So it makes sense for more experienced people in the field to help others, develop websites and develop websites with better systems, etc. So I think it's a really really powerful concept. And so speaking of Webflow, how did you go from planetarium educator to Webflower? But also, I'm interested in your YouTube Webflow um, career, or if that's the right word as well.
Yeah, sure. Um, so my transition from, uh, Planetarium to Webflow was, like, very rocky and is one of the failures I passed your way today when I got into it. But I was first interested in it, um, because I actually minored in web development in college. So I did have, like, sort of, like, a little bit of technical background. I'd taken, like, a handful of classes about it, about both design and development. So I, like, had a little bit of background. But at the middle of 2020, um, like, on my birthday was, like, the day the pandemic, like, shut everything down. And it just didn't really seem like I was going to go back, in the months that followed. One, just because of, like, museums weren't really going to be a place to be for a long time, with, like, everything surrounding the pandemic, and then two, like, a lot of the people I had, like, really grown to love working with there had left, and it just seemed like the right time to move on. Um, so I was just, like, you know, flailing around for a little bit, took a job at a call center, which I really was just, like, a bad moment in my life, and I just like looked up and I was like, I need to do something different right now. So I just started freelancing pretty much out of desperation, but really sort of fell in love with design and development on web, and just working directly with clients and having that flexibility and that freedom. Webflow came a little bit later, but that's sort of how it all started.
Okay, so let's get into the failures now, because I feel like you've started talking about this. So in terms of your last job before freelancing, then you were working in this call center, so you were kind of freelancing alongside this call center job. Have I understood that correctly?
No, so I honestly, freelancing had never even crossed my mind. I have always, from a really young age, one of those people who's like always had a job, even when I didn't really need a job and I was like pretty financially secure. Um, I've just like always felt some sort of insecurity around money and some sort of insecurity around like, oh, I need to be working. So I've had like a lot of different jobs. Um, and so when I left work at the planetarium, I was like, I need a new job immediately, even though it was like 2020 and nobody had a job. I was like, I need a new job immediately. Um, and uh, a very large phone company was hiring basically tech support assistants at a call center here, and it was remote. And I was like, this is great, and the money wasn't so bad. Except like my small brain was like, oh, it's a call center, so it's like very grueling work. And it was also so isolating because there were so many of us, and training was good because we were in a group, but as soon as we were done, it was like you're on your own. So that really only lasted 6 weeks, and I was like extremely depressed by the end of it. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I hate everything. This is so hard. Um, and luckily for me, I was with my partner who I'm still with, and he's like, "You don't have to do this job. You have like an emergency fund. You're gonna be okay if you leave and figure out something else." Um, so yeah, I remember I had one really, really bad call with somebody who just, didn't know how to turn their phone on and off. Um, and I this probably wasn't, like, good practice, but, like, after 2 hours, the call dropped, and I just, like, didn't call them back and went on a walk outside, and decided to quit. So, quit the next week and started looking into freelancing.
And that's where you started taking Webflow more seriously then?
Yeah, that's where I just started to think about, like, freelancing. I started learning WordPress initially, so that's what I was sort of looking at other people had done and were doing, pretty well for themselves with, and that's what I started to learn. Like, right after I quit, I was just looking at how people built websites and how people made a living off of that.
Interesting. So did you find that, coming from learning WordPress, and then I assume you found Webflow after that, I mean, a lot of people have used WordPress before using Webflow, and I think it's actually quite good training, because it's slightly harder maybe to use, and it's not necessarily as intuitive. So was that kind of helpful to learn before in a strange way?
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. I learned WordPress, and it wasn't until about a year later that I took up Webflow. But yeah, WordPress was just so frustrating for me. Like, it was helpful for me to like learn systems and learn sort of how everything worked together. Also, at the time, I was very much like working alongside agencies and sort of what I like to call like apprenticing in a way, like learning the trade, like learning from them, like how all of this worked together, how to work with clients, how to price,
Mm.
how to like just form a process. But everything was in WordPress, so it was like 10 times more complicated to like figure out which tools are we going to use for each little thing. So when I found Webflow a year later, I was like, I'm glad I have this experience, but I'm also like happy to not deal with WordPress anymore. Um, So yeah, I think it was really helpful to have that first experience be with a different tool.
So there's two things that you said there that I think are really interesting. One, you quit your job with the knowledge that you had an emergency fund, because I think a lot of people, they're like, right, I'm just going to go cold turkey, quit my job, and I'm just going to try freelancing. And then they realize that it's actually far harder than they thought. So you had an emergency fund, and you were freelancing alongside people that knew what they were doing in the space, not just from a technical perspective, but they'd work with clients. They had a process that you could learn from. And so you weren't just freelancing like, oh, what am I doing the whole time? Like you were kind of like, I don't know what to do. I can ask someone who knows more than me. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, and it would really be the way I recommend to do it. I know a lot of people are scared to take the leap into freelancing, but I think the best thing you can do is one, have an emergency fund and feel like you have like very stable financial footing, because the first year is very hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially for me, it was very hard that first year. And I didn't make a ton of money. Luckily, my rent was very low. I had like a support network of people around me to help out and support. But yeah, it really, really helped me mentally to know that I had that emergency fund in place, which for me was like 3 months of living expenses to if if it was going really poorly, just to know that like I had that safety net.
Definitely. And I think just the phrase take the leap into freelancing in my head is slightly problematic, because a lot of people think, right, I'm either full-time employed or I'm a freelancer. And
Yeah.
actually, there is a hybrid model where you can go to part-time work, and then when you can't manage, freelancing and part-time work, then you can go full-time. But it's like, I think take the leap to freelancing or whatever is take the baby steps to freelancing. I think less catchy, but maybe is kind of
Yeah.
helpful to consider.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's definitely not like the sexier option to like work part-time and
Yeah,
then work part-time on the side, but like it is, if it's much more, it will help you a lot more emotionally to like have the clientele you're building up, and then
yeah,
also just have stable income for a while, because like that really is the hard thing about freelancing, is like cash flow can be spotty and you have to be prepared for that mentally, and just like put in systems for that too in your business. So yeah.
definitely. And I was actually speaking to a friend, this guy called Greg Faulkner, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying his name. I'm sure he doesn't. But he worked on Fiverr to start with when he started doing Webflow, which a lot of people have said Fiverr's terrible, etc. And I think to earn a living wage just doing Fiverr jobs isn't necessarily that easy. But what he said was, although the jobs that he did initially were really badly paid, he was doing a website for $200 and whatever. What he did was he managed to build a network of clients, which is kind of like a flywheel effect, where they knew people and they recommended him. They kept coming back to him for work. He grew and they grew as clients, and they paid him more as he, got more and more experience. So yeah, I just think that's quite important to highlight from learning from your story as well, that you don't need to either be full-time employed and just quit to freelance just because you've seen people talk about how easy it is to get a 10K project on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I do wanna, like, caveat this with that I did do that, like, I did quit a job without anything else, but it was a different situation.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, you
you
had
don't
an
do that, but I'm different, so
Yeah,
but
I
yeah.
like, just to be clear, fully transparent as well. I did exactly the same thing as you.
Yeah.
I quit a job, tried to freelance, went back to a full time job because I found freelancing. It didn't support. I couldn't do my life. I
Yeah.
didn't have enough clients. I didn't have enough experience. And so, and I also felt at the time that that was kind of shameful, like I'd failed, like I was a terrible freelancer, like who am I to think I can freelance and stuff. But I think looking back, it was actually very humbling and really, really helpful to realize that freelancing is not necessarily as easy as tech bros say it is on Twitter, etc.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of hijacked your failure there, but I just wanted to kind of talk
No,
about that because I've been
absolutely.
seeing a lot of stuff online all about how easy it is to make money with Webflow, and I just think it's worth talking about on the pod. So tell me about failure number 2 then, spending the first year working alone.
Sure. So my first year of freelancing, I think I felt a lot of desperation around freelancing. I went into it with very much this like I I just need to do this to make money. Like I just need to like get to a place where I can survive. And there was a lot of shame built into that too, I think. Um, I think a large part of that was, we were in the middle of the pandemic. Everybody is struggling. Everybody's having a hard time. I like didn't want to talk to people about hard things, which is, I think, just part of my personality at the time. I was like, I don't want to address this with other people. So I didn't tell a ton of people just like in my social circle that I was freelancing. Um, at least not long term, because I didn't know if it was going to be long term at the time. Um, so I didn't make a ton of friends. I didn't like network very much. I found a lot of my clients through Upwork at the time too, just like to get started, which was, I know some people don't like to use it, but it was really helpful for me getting started. And while I was freelancing, like many of my other friends, like from college, also started freelancing, and I just didn't talk to them about it because I felt so much shame around it. And looking back, I'm not sure why I did, because it's nothing to like be ashamed of, but I think I just felt so much internal pressure to do it and to do it on my own, that I didn't like account for the fact that like other people would want to help me and would be very helpful to like just like have a human connection with at the time. So my first year was very lonely. And even though I was like really enjoying the flexibility and really enjoying learning, I felt so much just like sadness and loneliness around freelancing and around working independently. So after the year was over and I was like, oh, I do really like freelancing, but I need friends, because this is very tough. And that's sort of when I found Webflow, which was like best friend community professionally ever. So I was really grateful for all of that aligning at the same time.
Do you think there was a sense of imposter syndrome when you first started that meant you thought, oh, well, I'm not good enough to even say that I'm a freelancer, so, and I'm not getting paid enough to feel valuable enough to talk about this, or kind of can we explore that a little bit
Yeah,
further?
I think that probably was it. Like, because I did have a little bit of background in web dev, but I didn't feel like a freelancer. I think so much of my identity was still tied to education and to, planetarium life, because that was such a huge part of my identity for a long time that it was difficult for me to like tell people I was doing something different, which is just one of those things where like you probably shouldn't define your identity by your job. But it was especially hard for me in that moment too, because like I was doing something totally different than what I had wanted to do forever. So yeah, there definitely was some imposter syndrome there, and also just like uneasiness with what I was doing. Like I wasn't very sure of myself at all at the time, and it took a while for me to feel like I had footing again.
Maybe there was also a little bit of grief almost that you'd lost that planetarium educator part of your life, and you were like, I don't want to tell other people that I've left that, and I'm scared to say that I've left that, maybe.
Yeah, no, that too. Like I honestly haven't thought about that time a lot because it was like such an like a weird time for me, but I think that that is true. Like there was a lot of grief around losing that job, around losing that community. And there was just like a lot of grief at that time in general. Like I like missed people. I didn't see people at that time. And to like lose a career path also just felt very sad to me and very sad to like move on to something new. So yeah, you're totally right.
Do you feel then that even though that you're still working from behind a computer and you might be alone a lot of the time. You're not lonely because of the Webflow community that's so active on Twitter and in forums and stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that way. One thing that I sort of dove more into after realizing all of this was like, oh, I need to like feel secure in myself apart from like work, apart from like what I am able to do professionally. So that was part of it. And then the other part of it was like, yeah, just building connection into my day. Currently, I meet with two other freelancers once a week to just go over like accountability stuff and also just chat over coffee, which is really helpful to have both like the consistency of like somebody you see every single week and are just like talking about goals with every single week. So that's been really helpful. And then also just to like be in the Webflows community on Twitter and stuff. And I know you asked about YouTube. I didn't really get into that. But YouTube just felt like a natural thing for me to do because I had done it so much as like part of my life for so long. And I saw that it was really helpful for other people to do. And I also saw this gap where I was like, there aren't a ton of one, women doing Webflow tutorials, and two, people doing this casually and not like super edited, bro. This is the tutorial for your business life. And I just wanted to bring it down in that space a little bit, and make it fun. So having that too, because I've always known YouTube is a great place to like connect with people. So that is another part of me reaching back out.
Yeah, I think your YouTube channel is more like go to a coffee shop and do a bit of Webflow with Casey, more than, if I may say, like that's kind of how I feel when I watch your videos, in comparison to a lot of Webflow content that's already out there. So I think
Yeah.
it's really cool that you've kind of claimed that part of you in the digital space. And speaking of, I think your studio redesign, which for anyone that hasn't checked it out, Casey's got a new website now. She launched it, was it last week?
It was last week. Yeah, I
Last
think.
week. And I think it's really cool how you have infused your personality into the website so deeply, because I think a lot of people who start in the Webflow space, including myself, I'm not trying to shit on anyone, this is me too when I first started, is that you look at what other people are doing and you say, I want a bit of that is what I'm going to do, and you actually lose who you are and how your personality and your tone of voice and all of those things that I think actually are so important to attract the right people into your life and attract the right clients into your work. So can you tell us a little bit about how you managed to kind of reclaim your space identity and that part of you and the science part and obviously the name Artsci, and can you tell us a little bit about that process coming together?
Yeah, I would love to. So first I kind of want to say that it does take a while to like figure all this out and that it's like okay to borrow other people's things for a while until you figure your stuff out. Like that's what I think about the artistic processes a lot, right? Like we like paint Starry Night and try to like copy that, and then we paint like, another thing and try to copy that. And it takes a while like as an artist to like develop your own style and to like figure out like, oh, what speaks to me. And I've really found the same thing in freelancing and in a design and in a process and like crafting that part of your life too. So with the redesign, I had felt for a while that I one had sort of outgrown the name Casey Cat Creative, mostly because I really felt for the past 6 months that I wanted to separate like my name from my business. For some people, that's great. But I have already had like a musical career with my name and also like a scientific career with my name. And I also didn't want to like add this onto my name, Casey Katalbas, because when you Google me, the first thing you find is my music. And I just really wanted my professional life to stand on its own, and just like web design and stuff to stand on its own. So I've known for a while that I wanted to redesign and rename specifically. And I was actually at State of Flow, the conference in Florida, when we were all talking about goals. And I knew that I really had this idea around art and science, and I see a lot of designers and developers in that space, specifically Webflow people too, who are very like art oriented, but are very like also tech and STEM oriented. And I knew that that's like a place I want to stay, coming from an art background, coming from my planetarium background and my science background. My partner is a scientist. I'm an artist. I like love that world, like those people meeting together. So I was like walking home and I was like, Artsci sounds cool. And then I was like, Artsci, it'll be fine either way. So that was the idea behind the name, just to like bring those two worlds together in a way that makes sense for design. And then the visual brand really came out of wanting to still feel like a professional business. I wanted to like move forward as like modern. So the type was something I really took a lot of time to look at. But I wanted it to feel like funky and silly too. So I really wanted the type to speak to sort of my personality of being like, I know what I'm doing, but I'm going to have a good time doing it. And then incorporating a lot of like space, beauty, imagery into the website too. So that's kind of where the brand design came from.
Awesome. So it sounds like you recognized, that you wanted to appear professional, but also show your personality in such a way that like felt like it was really you. Because I think there is a risk of like going too far and you're like crazy animations and stuff, and it can be like actually quite hard for someone to even hire you because they're like, where's the button to even contact you? So I think you've got that really good balance between
Thanks.
showing your personality and incorporating the space imagery and stuff like that, but also making sure that the website is clear and usable. And I think that's quite a hard balance to do. So has that taken you a few months to actually get together?
Oh yeah, dude. It's like everybody says this, but like the hardest website to work on is your own. And it was probably like good to go 2 months ago, but like 2 months ago, I just totally like decided on a different typeface. Because the one I had originally chosen was like a much cleaner typeface. Oh my god, if there are any type nerds out there, I was like gonna use Big Caslon because Big Caslon's back in the Adobe suite. Um, but I was like, it's a little like too clean, a little too professional, and it didn't feel like me. And that's why I like didn't want to launch it at the time. So I just like ended up redoing everything with a different typeface. But yeah, the hardest website to work on is your own because it's like personal in a lot of ways too. Like you want it to feel good, and you also don't want to like redo it immediately, even though you may want to. So yeah, it took a while.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of the time, like a friend of mine, he's starting out in the Webflow space, and he says, well, how can I make a portfolio without portfolio projects? Which I think is quite a common question among Webflowers starting out. And it seems to be that you've taken the approach to go on Upwork to get your first clients and showcase that portfolio work. But you also do quite interesting projects like Tinder for Fish, and you kind of you'll just make stuff that you want to make, and no doubt that makes your skill sets better, but also gives you interesting portfolio pieces. Is that kind of how you would advise someone to approach getting their first clients and pulling together a few pieces for a portfolio website?
yeah, I think one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've heard for this is to do like fake projects for clients or templates or something that you can build and you can feel proud of that isn't for a client but could be. So that's kind of where I would advise. The way I kind of went about that is very different because a lot of my projects were definitely not going to be for clients. They were just silly stuff. But it was also sort of my chance to learn Webflow. And when I'm learning something new, I really want it to be fun. So Tinder for Fish, my baguette website, my like retro cat website, all came from a place of like, I really want to have fun with this. I want it to be silly. I want it to like bring me joy while I'm learning. I don't want to make like a template for a real estate firm. So uh that's sort of my approach there too. But like I think if you do have like an industry you could see yourself working in, like that's a really exciting place to get started and a really exciting place to like, maybe I can like build a project around this and also like find a way to make it fun for you and your personality.
That's great advice. So what you're saying is you kind of gamified it for yourself. You were like, well, I know I want to learn Webflow, but I know that client projects might not give me the chance to explore the extent to which I can use my creativity. So I'm just going to make like kind of silly fun projects. But then you also got some clients from artwork that maybe wanted something that's not Tinder for Fish. So you were learning Webflow, like the full extent to which you can use Webflow with really creative projects, but then you were also getting kind of portfolio work a little bit from that.
Yeah, it was sort of interesting because I was sort of doing Webflow in this very fun way, but I was still pretty much my primary clientele was WordPress clients. So I was doing all this WordPress work and I was learning Webflow on the side with my silly little YouTube projects. And so it took a while for me to like actually get solid Webflow clients and Webflow work. And it's something, that I'm still working towards even a year later to like build up that outside of like my WordPress work. But yeah, I think having like getting into like a very fun spirit at the beginning was a great way for me to like uh, just break into the world. And one of my first Webflow like serious clients was like a very fun website where we did a lot of like interactions. It was the one I like learned how to make a calculator on. So it was kind of fun because in retrospect, I feel like by doing a lot of fun stuff, I attracted very fun clients. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, this is like make the work that you want to get
yeah.
type idea. That I've butchered the phrase of Christo, who anyone who's like, that's not your idea, Jack. No, it's not. It's Christo's, or at least I heard it from Christo. But that's really, really good advice then. So yeah, try and figure out what you just generally enjoy and make stuff around that for your first portfolio pieces, or just learning how to use Webflow. I think is really, really good advice, because I think a lot of people get in this kind of analysis paralysis where they're like, I don't know how to use Webflow, but I don't really know, and I don't have any portfolio pieces. And it's like, you need to just start.
You just gotta
Make stuff.
make something.
Yeah, and that's going to probably lead you to what you should make. But you need to take that first step to know if it's for you or not. Okay, let's get into your third failure then. Tell me about failure number 3, having a survive mindset rather than a growth mindset.
Yeah. So this is sort of tied into number 2, but besides just being lonely at the first year, um, I wasn't really invested in freelancing. I was very invested in like making money. I was very invested in like getting by. And I think a lot of that comes from my mindset around freelancing to begin with. So I'm in Nashville. There are a lot of like artists and songwriters here and people who are really trying to make a living on art. And a lot of them are freelancers too, but the way they sort of treat freelancing, and so the way I had always imagined freelancing is like you just do it to make enough money so that you can do the stuff you actually want to do. And as somebody who's also an artist, I like kind of gave it that tone at the beginning, in the midst of everything else too. And I was like, I just need to get by. Um, And because of that, I didn't invest in a lot of things that could have helped me. I didn't invest in as much into like mentorship. I didn't invest into processes. I didn't invest into like just growing my network, all things that would have been really, really helpful in that first year. And I sort of had to catch up to as I kind of grew a lot more in my second year. But I I think like if you're gonna start out freelancing, you have to do it with like the intention that you want to make it work, and want to like have it grow you as a professional, as a person, as like a career. And part of that can be exploratory too, but I think it's really difficult to go into any new decision with the survivalist mindset because it kind of puts your brain into panic mode around everything that happens. Like if I didn't win a client, I would like panic. If I like did something really bad, I was so stressed. But going into freelancing, I think with just the mindset around having this really serve me as a person and that like, you know, all my failures in this are also going to serve me as a person is a lot more helpful than going in with the thought that like if I don't do really good, I'm going to like lose all my money and die, you know what I mean? And I think coming out of like that first year of freelancing, I really like took that to heart, especially I was like, I really want to do this for a long time. Um, and just started to more position myself to like, I feel a lot more open to learning from other people and feel a lot more open to treating this like a business rather than just a side thing.
So, okay, lots of interesting things you just said there. So, acting like the professional you want to be, I think is quite an important point. If you want to be a Webflower, even at the start, when maybe you're not, maybe you don't have the skill set yet or the experience. If you're serious about it, um, then yeah, it helps to invest in yourself. That might be investing in courses. That might be asking people who are better than you for help, like we talked about earlier. But I think that's a really important point. And then coming on from that, you talked about your attitude to failures, where you looked at it like the failures are going to serve me rather than kind of going half-assed at it and being like, well, you know, I kind of went half-assed, so who cares, right? Like, it's not really that important. What you're saying is, I want to learn from the failures that I do, and I'm going to go two-footed tackle into this, and I'm going to mess up, but I'm going to commit and learn from there and iterate and treat it like a job, even though it wasn't yet at that time. Is that fair?
Yeah, I definitely think that's sort of the right idea. Like taking yourself a little more seriously. Like even if you're a beginner, like you're everybody is gonna know you're a beginner, and that's okay. And like having just that understanding that you're probably gonna feel like an imposter, and like you are going to make mistakes, but that is like okay. We know. And that's sort of something when I'm like talking to new freelancers too, they're like always scared that, oh, I really don't want to mess this up. Like, but like I think if you're transparent like that with yourself and with your clients that like I'm new, I'm learning, and I am going to do absolutely the best I can. That's a very honest thing to do, and it's like a very helpful thing to like do with yourself and do with like your clients at the beginning, and it really helps you build that experience and that confidence, which is something just I didn't have at the beginning. I had like absolutely no confidence in my abilities, um, just as a person. So just like building that confidence in yourself is huge.
So if someone's listening now that says, I hear what you're saying, but how do I build confidence in myself? How do I change my mindset from a survival mindset to a growth mindset? I'm going to put you on the spot with a very difficult question here, but how? You're like, anyone that's just listening to the audio of this is like looking at me like, please don't ask me that. Oh, but I mean,
No, yeah.
have practical advice for anyone that's like in maybe a survival mindset mode where they're like, yeah, like I'd like to do Webflow, but I'm not sure if I really want to commit and I don't want to invest in myself. Everything looks like a cost, even though it might help me in the future. And I might, do you see what I mean? How do you kind of
Yeah. I think just to speak to like, the theme of this podcast, like you really need to to build confidence, you need to go in knowing that you're going to mess up. And like having that acceptance to know that you will have like hard times and it will be difficult. But like being able to tell yourself that you're going to be okay is huge. And that's sort of the thing that really helped me as I kind of switched this mindset, was telling myself like I'm going to mess up, but I will be okay and I'm going to get better from this, and taking everything in stride and being like, this didn't go well, but what can I learn from this? I think that is something that really built my confidence and helped me in every situation where I was like, I'm not sure if I belong here. Taking a step back and being like, why do I feel that way? What can I learn from this? Why am I feeling really not confident right now? And being able to like separate yourself in a way from all your bad thoughts and all your like just like the thoughts that discount yourself. Being able to step back and like just examine it from a different point of view and come back and then tell yourself like, you don't need to feel that way, like you're awesome, was helpful. And I know that's like not going to work for everybody, but I think that's like the first step to getting there, and building that confidence is just being really gracious to yourself and being kind when you feel like you don't belong somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, God, this is a powerful episode. So looking for the lessons in every flail you have, rather than just being like, oh, I fucked up, full stop. And then just being like, this isn't for me. Instead, you say, I'm going to mess up hundreds of times. And as long as I try and decrease the amount of mess ups I have in the long run, I think I heard Casey Neistat talk about this with YouTube, his YouTube career. And he said, I'm just going to make 100 videos and I just need to get them out of my system because the first 100 videos are not going to be good. So, and then, from those 100, obviously he's learned loads. And yeah, I mean, just the fact that I don't need to necessarily explain who Casey Neistat is suggests he's done pretty well for himself, right? So I think this same concept could be applied to web design, where it's like your first 100 clients, you're probably not going to do a very good job. Like, you might not guide them through the process very well. You might not handle scope creep very well. You might not, do proper SEO for the first few and stuff. But that doesn't mean it's not worth going on from there. And then this negative self-talk thing, huge. This like negative Nelly that's on your back saying you can't do it. You just need to listen to that person and then just say, I'm going to do it anyway. Because I think, everyone has self-talk, but it's just how you manage it in the long run, I think. Sorry, I got a bit passionate there.
No, yeah, I agree. That was really hard for me at the beginning because like logically I knew I would be bad, but doing it in practice, I'm like, why am I so bad? But you just have to like do it a lot of times before you even start to get good at something. And then, maybe like even with that negative self-talk, maybe you do it 100 times and you still don't like to do it. But having that perspective where you're like, I know myself well enough to know that this isn't for me. And like getting to know that voice inside your head and separate like, this is just like bad voices, but this is actually me. And that's huge. And like that's just something that is hard to find in life. And part of just growing as a person is learning yourself and understanding like your true voice.
Yeah, and coming on from that, like owning your failures. I had a client when I first started and I completely fucked their website. And it was not good. Like mobile was all over the shop, and it was terrible. And they were really angry with me, and which was completely fair because I had sent them for a review, and they were like, "What is this even done?" And I was like, And what I could have done is just made an excuse, but I just said, to be perfectly frank, you are one of my first clients, and I'm not at the place where I need to be in order to hand this off to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work really hard over the next 24 hours. I'm going to sort this out, and it's going to be okay. Now, by taking charge of that failure and being brutally honest with myself and them, rather than just trying to make an excuse and be like, yeah, like it's fine. Trust me, it's gonna look great on a mobile. Well, like, it must be your mobile. What are you using? A Motorola or whatever? Actually just
Yeah.
owning it and fixing it by actually paying someone to help me with it. It was a hard lesson to learn, but I think your client will respect you a lot more if you own the mistakes that you make and you sort them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds tough. Tough first project.
Our first gig, and I was like, what the hell? This whole freelancing thing, I've been sold a lie. Everyone's making hundreds of thousands on Twitter. What the hell? Like, I can't even make a website. So yeah, for anyone that's listening, it's like,
Yeah.
this is for me. Trust me. We have all been there. Like,
Yeah.
I read Joseph Berry at the start when he was just like a pimple-faced teenager, was just like, I'm not that good at animation, and now look at him.
I know. He's Joseph Berry.
Yeah, he's Joseph Berry. Famous.
Everybody.
Niche.
That's like what's really good about this podcast. It's like nobody is good at the beginning. Like nobody's good at the beginning.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole ethos of this, that like, you're looking at people up in the stars and you're thinking, wow, I'm never going to get there. Trust me, they had people who they thought were up in the stars and were like, I'm never going to get there. And, you develop and grow, and you make plenty of mistakes that aren't necessarily talked about in the 120 character limit on Twitter. Okay, sorry, I'm getting on my high horse. So we've talked about these 3 failures then. We've talked about your job at this call center and realizing it wasn't for you, but that you quit with savings. So you had 3 months buffer, which is a really important point for people to think about if they're thinking about jumping to freelancing. You can take baby steps. Better to have some kind of buffer. And you also found people that were more experienced than you to lean on, ask questions about, and understand the systems of. Then your other advice is about finding people who are also doing the same thing as you are. Why not have some accountability group that you meet with once a week just to check in and say, hey, my client's being really difficult. What do you guys advise and stuff? Because you're not alone. We're all tackling these problems together. Your failures will serve you. Sorry, we went in a bit on that, didn't we? But you're not going to be good for a little while. And the sooner you realize that as someone that's just starting out with Webflow, the more you can make mistakes, learn from them, get better. And I think that's a really, really important point that's not necessarily talked about, because a lot of people talk about money and how much money they're earning straight away. And you just think, yay, I'm going to earn 10K from a client. And there's some hard yards to go before anything like that. So yes, that was my little summary. Is there anything I've forgotten there, Casey, that you want to highlight? Because there were so many nuggets from this episode.
Good. Is there any nuggets? I don't know. I mean, where are the nuggets at? I think, yeah, I do feel like the most valuable thing for me was finding friends. I think loneliness is so real as a freelancer. And I think if you can find somebody who will listen to you consistently, you will do a lot better in this career. So that's like the main piece of advice I have for other people.
Okay, find friends, talk to us. How do you find friends as an adult? I'm asking genuinely for me.
Oh, like within Webflow or like in life?
Well, maybe this is off the podcast. I'm talking about as someone that's coming into the Webflow space, and everyone talks about community, but how do I find my community? What would you advise?
Yeah. For me, I hopped on Twitter and just started replying to people. That was really helpful. I also made YouTube videos. Maybe you don't feel comfortable with that, but maybe you can comment. Just participate. Flow Party is one I'm a part of. People there are so like kind and welcoming, and like also like very casual and silly. I've loved really being a part of that community. Also, State of Flow people, incredible group of people. And if you just want to know what's happening like right now, Colleen Brady is like posting every single event ever. So if you just like want to hop into like a call, there's like always something going on, especially in the Webflow community. And just participate. Like people are there because they want community too. So like that's why those things exist. So yeah, it's super accessible in this space.
Definitely. And there's so many friendly people that are open to you just messaging and saying, hey, can I pick your brains about how you've got to where you are in your career? Definitely worth getting into Twitter. If you don't have Twitter and you're in the Webflow space, I really recommend it. There's a lot of interesting people there. Casey, thank you so much for coming on this. Sorry, I don't know why I keep doing this.
I'm sorry. This is like an audio medium, but we're just doing it praying hands.
Just praying to me. Yeah, no, I think it's because there's that emoji, the thanks.
Oh
emoji.
yeah, the thanks emoji.
And I say that loads, but now it's so weird. I feel like I brought my like digital emoji life into real life, and now I'm just praying.
I love it. Yeah, sorry I like razzed you for that. It was just funny.
No, it's really weird. I think I need to stop doing that. As an English person, you're not really meant to talk with your hands, but I go a bit Italian on the podcast.
I appreciate it.
Okay, as long as you're cool with it. But no, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Before you go though, I'm just going to ask you one more question. What is your next failure going to be?
Great question. It could be anything, really. I think the next step for me that's going to be interesting is like I'm very interested in like scaling and working with a team a little bit more and just figuring that out. I know there's going to be a lot more bumps in the road. I've done it a little bit before, but it's something I want to like pursue more because I have recognized a lot more that there are things that I am not good at and other people are. And that will probably be the next one, is figuring out how to collaborate with others as part of my own business, and hiring and that kind of stuff. So we'll see.
Great. Well, we'll get you on in a year's time. We can go through those failures.
Perfect.
Or should we say learnings? Better word.
Yes.
Flails.
The flails.
Thank you so much for going on the podcast. If anyone wants to message you about this episode, where should people find you?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter. I'm on YouTube. Those are probably the two easiest places to access me. I'm also on LinkedIn. And I check those pretty regularly, so you can hit me up in any of those places.
And that
is Casey Cat Creative on Twitter. And then Artsci Studio is my website. Artsci Studio is also my YouTube. And then LinkedIn's just my name, Casey Katalbas.
Awesome. Casey, thank you so much for coming on the WebFlow podcast. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, Jack. It was great to chat this morning.
I did the emoji thing again, didn't I? What am I like? I did the pray thing. I gotta stop. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so